So welcome everyone. We'll get started in just a moment. I'll ask if you have any specific year-over-year reporting objectives. I'm really curious, and I think there'll be time today to dig into one or two of them. If there's something specific that you need to do, maybe think about that. I'll ask in a couple of slides. So I just thought to throw that out there for any of you early birds. We'll get started in just about a minute. I'm really curious what everybody needs to accomplish with year-over-year reporting. So I've had some fun putting together today's material, but as always, I feel like, oh, I could do so much. We could talk about so much more. So Colin has a good one. Lead creation date tracking that spans more than a single year. Yeah, I feel like I was a little lazy with my data set. I'm using the Einstein Analytics dev orgs, which come with thousands of records, which are good for reporting. These are the ones that we've used in all the dojos. And unless you go back and create old data, the challenge with create dates, you can actually technically request from Salesforce support to allow you to change the created dates and the last modified dates. So you can load old dates, but I did not do that. So I can show you using another date field how we'll do that. We'll look at some techniques, but glad. Thanks for sharing that, Colin. All right, welcome to the Dashboard Dojo. Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about year-over-year reporting. So glad that you could join us. We have Kyle Shagnon here again as our host. Thank you, Kyle.
Happy to be here.
Okay, great. So let's dig in. So today, much like I think this is the same slide I always use. Basically, we'll do an introduction, talk about some techniques, and we'll just show some stuff in a dev org. I'll talk about upcoming Dojo topics, upcoming OpFocus events. I think we've got an event tomorrow. Kyle, what is the event on tomorrow?
Sure. So that is actually going to be, I'm pretty excited for it. Two of our growth advisors are going to be leading roundtables, talking a little bit about either validating your 2022 growth plan or executing on it. So it's a great opportunity to connect with other members of the RevOps community, kind of see what they're up to and what their plan is, and then pick the brain of a growth advisor. So
that's great. Yep. So that's coming up, and then we'll have time for Q&A. Please ask Q&A, ask questions throughout. Probably most of it we do through chat. Kyle will also monitor the Q&A section as well. All right, so quick intro for myself. My name is David Carnes. That is not a painting on me of me on the left. That's a painting of Adele Bloch-Bauer. This painting is known as The Woman in Gold. I first saw it. It's at the Noy Gallery in New York City, and this was the subject of a Matt Damon film where a descendant, actually the niece of Adele Bloch-Bauer, sued the Austrian government. But anyway, just a little bit about me. I'm an art fan. I'll go to any art museum I can find, and it's been fun with all the travel I've done to, find art museums in every city around the world that I've been to. I'm the chairman and chief evangelist of OpFocus. So we're a consulting shop. We're in our 16th year. We work with SaaS companies to optimize revenue operations. So that event that Kyle mentioned for tomorrow is on strategic planning, and we'll talk about strategic planning. A lot of the context is around SaaS revenue operations, but a few of our senior consultants will be leading essentially roundtable discussions. So that's a little bit about us. So OpFocus, we're about a 55-person team spread out across the US and Canada. We eat, sleep, and breathe BizOps and RevOps, so it's a lot of fun. The platform is great. All right, enough about me. So I thought to talk a little bit about why is year-over-year analysis so meaningful? Businesses, tend to, during the fall or during the last few months of a fiscal year, work on budgeting for the next year. That budgeting process is often influenced by prior results and trends and things like that. And we want to see, did we achieve those goals? We want to see, did we have a good year, bad year, et cetera. So this whole year over year, and I'm curious, we'll open it up in just a minute. I'd be really interested to hear what some of you have for year over year goals. What I thought to talk about today, really specifically, like to Cullen's request, about just grouping dates and taking advantage of some of the grouping capabilities that we have. I also thought to talk about, once you've grouped that data, there are some other ways to look at the data, such as stacked bar charts that you can stack up to 100% to show the proportion. And if you show that over time, it's sort of interesting to look at. We'll talk about leveraging additional summaries. So on a Salesforce report, you can have up to 5 summary columns. We'll talk about a few different ways to use those. There's also things like min, max, average. We also have unique available to us, and talk about taking advantage of those. We'll talk about adding extra measures. So on a report, you can have up to 4 measures. So you could have data from up to 4 columns. The data type just has to be the same, but there's some ways to work with that. You could even add a second axis off to the right. And again, this can be really compelling. Just add extra meaning when you're showing data year by year, just adding some extra oomph to it. As always, I love to dabble with formulas. We'll show some of the same formulas that we looked at earlier in the year around showing the change in dollar amount or the change in percentage. These can be applied in so many interesting ways. I'll also mention a couple of tools where, if you're doing year-over-year analysis, they're probably not the right thing to go after. So I'll talk about those, even though they have the word trend in them, it's just not going to be helpful. So to stay away from. And then, there's sort of a laundry list of other things that we could do. And I just didn't, this isn't a full compendium, unfortunately. So before we get started, I'd be so interested if any of you would come off mute. If you raise your hand, Kyle can have you come off mute. It'd be really interesting to hear if you have any specific year-over-year goals. So Cullen mentioned lead creation date tracking that spans more than a single year. So that's a great one. I might answer that with either case data. I don't have a great data set in this org that I'm working with, but so Brandon mentioned, as a growing company, I had a simple one to show how many customer support cases were created each month this year compared to last year. Great, so we'll do that example. Again, my data set isn't perfect for it, but we can take a look at it. Does anyone else have any mandates that they need to achieve with year-over-year reporting that they might like to share? All right, looks like Tracy has one. I've been asked to create a report showing all new accounts for 2021, but stuck because account is not considered a customer until the first opportunity is closed won. Oh, interesting. So we could, if you're saying an account is a customer, we could use a roll-up summary on off of opportunity, and we could say based on the earliest closed won date. That's one that I didn't think of, and I think we should look at that. So Ty is saying it's going to be a sponge. Awesome. So glad you're here. You're all here. Why don't we just dive right in? So if any of you have more examples, I love the idea of the one that Tracy mentioned. We should look at that because that's one I wasn't thinking of earlier, and it's a nice straightforward one to show. So let's dive right in. So sort of always start with why. Probably some of you have read that Simon Sinek book. Why do we do year-over-year analysis? Well, we want to identify trends. So whether it's past trends, we want to try to project a little bit into the future. We have so many interesting things to look at with year-over-year analysis. So I want to encourage you that if you create something and look at opportunity amounts year-over-year, that on that same report, or if you do a save as, you could clone, you can create so many other interesting variations right from the same report. And that could be just adding sums, averages, max, min onto the same report. And I'll show some examples of that. Certainly percentages, the percentage change, the amount changed. So you've probably noticed when you create a report and you show a chart on that report, if you hover over each chart wedge, it'll show you the percentage, but you have to hover over the chart wedge. If you actually want to show the percentages on a chart, you would need to actually use a formula for that, and we'll talk about that. Some other things with the year-over-year analysis, it's great for spotting weaknesses. Basically, any pick list that you have pretty much filled in for every case or every lead or every campaign or every opportunity. Pick lists are really great, because, especially if they're required, because they're always filled in. A nice example within OpFocus is the opportunity type field. So the opportunity type is new business, the opportunity type is existing customer, and that win rate or opportunity creation rate for new customers versus existing, it's really interesting analysis. And we could find weaknesses where in past years, if we had X amount of new business and suddenly this year our new business dropped, maybe we need to add emphasis on marketing. We can certainly aim our year-over-year analysis prowess at teams. So we could aim it at individuals, products, product families, regions, industries. Again, things that are pick lists or, where we know the data will be there on these records. So this depends on how we've set up Salesforce, what's required. But really, we can really dig in and do some interesting stuff. And a lot of that interesting stuff can just start from one report showing one thing, and you just change a grouping. And now you've got another look at the same trending data. So I encourage you to, come up with some interesting look at the data. What if you tried out different groupings? What if you tried out different calculations on that same source report? Suddenly you have so many interesting looks at the data. So a little bit more specifically, we could look at sales rep performance. We could look at prospecting. So how many opportunities did Sally sales rep create this year versus last year? What were Sally sales reps sales bookings this year versus last year? What was Sally's win rate this year versus last year? Well, I'd probably look at the entire team, each individual, and look at the number of opportunities they created, the opportunities they sold, the win rate, stuff like that. Very similarly, for a support team, you might have for each team or for each agent individually, what was their average time to close cases? What was their case volume? So how many cases did they work on? What was their individual CSAT? I think there's a whole bunch of metrics there. Again, cases have a lot of pick lists typically. Those pick lists are often required, things like status and type and origin and reason that we can take advantage of. With the year-over-year reporting, as long as we have sort of good source data, we can really dig in pretty well. So Tracy asked a question about win rate, and I'll show that as well. We can do that with a summary formula, looking at all of your closed won and closed lost opportunities, and you add a summary formula. The win rate formula is very simple. So just to round this out, marketing, if they're using Salesforce as well, if you have campaign data, we could look at campaign performance year over year. In our world, many of our competitors will have a booth at Dreamforce every year. They spend large amounts of money on that booth, and they might look at the number of leads generated at Dreamforce in the expo hall year over year, things like that. Certainly marketing qualified leads, MQL, we might look at the volume of leads that have been generated. Maybe we invested more heavily in marketing this year, so we want to see more leads generated or more quality leads generated. And certainly when we start looking at quality, things like conversion ratios. So of all the leads that were created that were marketing qualified, how many of them actually bought something? And we want to show those trends over time. So many interesting examples of this. Looks like Dwayne talked about applications received of today's date. Yeah, so Dwayne, that's such a great example. I always find the nonprofit or university examples to be so good, because you just sort of think everybody can grasp, did we have more applications this year versus last year? And then, based on that, of all those, how many offers were made? And then based on all the offers made, how many students matriculated? So that data set's also very rich for year over year. And please, keep in mind, any of you that are at nonprofits, when I talk about sales and opportunity data, that's 100% applicable to fundraising. If you're going for grants or you're going for fundraising, what was our win rate of all the grants we submitted this year? What was the win rate of all the fundraising donations that we pursued? So I think we could go on and on here, but just to sort of talk about why The bigger why here is helping businesses make good decisions in planning for the future. What worked, what didn't work, what was a total disaster, how do we avoid stepping in that sort of pile of steaming, whatever, again, next year. So year-over-year analysis, I think it's a really healthy thing. And once you build this, you could, probably, use the same stuff next year and maybe add on to the same set of reports and dashboards. So let's talk about a few different things. So this is something Cullen asked about, just simple grouping of report data by dates. So you can see in my screenshot here that this particular report is grouped twice. It's an opportunity report, and I've grouped it by close date and I've grouped it by type. And when you add a grouping, such as on close date, two things that I want you to think about right away are, is it ascending or descending? And I can see that this is ascending, so the arrow's pointing up. I think a lot of us want to see ascending, so I want to see the data from 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, and I want to see it ascending, essentially from left to right. And then the other thing you want to do, especially when grouping by dates, is go down to the group date by. And when you see that, it's going to show you day, calendar week, calendar month, calendar quarter, calendar year, fiscal year. It may not be obvious, but if you hover just for a second and you scroll, a scroll bar appears and you can scroll down, and there are 3 more choices. Now, for many of you that do not have a standard fiscal year, I'm sort of doing year-over-year analysis because it's December. It's probably a little sort of oriented toward people that have calendar fiscal years. If your fiscal year ends in January, or it ends in April, or it ends in June, you would probably be doing fiscal years instead of calendar years when doing this year-over-year analysis. So just to point that out, when you do groupings, it's not obvious that you can scroll down, and there are a few more choices here, including ones that are useful for other types of analysis, such as month-over-month analysis, that you can use this calendar month and year. Okay, so spend a little bit of time there. I think it's important that you know your business calendar. I think Ty mentioned, and I'm thinking Ty's a guy, so I'll use the pronoun he. So Ty mentioned that he's new to, thank you, Ty, new to his role. And, one of the first things you're going to want to ask is, what is our fiscal year? And I would not make an assumption. Some industries, the fiscal years are all lined up, where they start July 1 and they end June 30th. Some organizations like OpFocus, we're a team of 55. We don't have much complexity. A calendar year works just fine. But other organizations 100% will start April 1, July 1, September 1, or they might even be staggered. Like Salesforce's fiscal year starts February 1st. So they are finishing up FY22 right now. So they use the ending month's year, which is January, to indicate their fiscal year. Their fiscal year ends January 31st, and they will begin fiscal 23 February 1st. And we can handle that no problem in Salesforce, but just know that if you have something that's staggered, or you're not using calendar year, that fiscal year is important to know. And if you have even something that's totally can't be handled directly in Salesforce through the custom fiscal years, we always have the ability to use formula fields to bucket our dates the way we need to. I've had a few. One was a global semiconductor company, and their quarter began on like the 6th of a month. And you go, what? But that's what they needed. So we just wrote a formula field that calculated, essentially bucketed within the formula field, which years things should be assigned to. So when using the group date by, you want to, on the report, in the report editor, while you're editing the report, after you've added the grouping, click on the down arrow, group date by, and choose the appropriate thing. So for Cullen's question, we would create a report on leads, and we would group by the created date. And then in the report editor, once we've added that grouping, just go to the pull down menu, group date by, as it's shown here, and choose either calendar year or fiscal year. All right, so why don't I just show a little bit of that in the system. So if I come back over here, this report is the one that I was just showing. Let me make it a little larger for you guys. And I've just added two groupings. So I added a grouping on close date and I added a grouping on type. Ty mentioned he's new, just thought to throw it out there. If you're looking at a report like this and you're just like trying to get oriented, here's this guy, David, he likes art, he lived in Japan, whatever. What am I looking at? Well, up here in the gray oval, you can always tell the report type. And this gray oval is available in the report editor. When you run the report, you can see the report type also up in the top left corner of the report. And so it says report : this is the report type here. This is what we're reporting on. This is an out of the box report type, but I find that helpful to know, if you're just looking at somebody else's report and you're like, what are we looking at? So we've created a report on opportunity. We've grouped it by close date and by type. And then to show that grouping, if we just come down to the pull down here, we can control the ascending, descending, and then we can go group date by. And you see, if I come over here, the scroll bar doesn't appear. I actually have to come over and start scrolling to see these bottom three choices. These two here, fiscal year and calendar month and year, may be your best friends, sort of depending on your organization when doing year-over-year reporting. So it's sort of, I kind of wish the scroll bar would just appear because I'm hovering over. We see that when sizing dashboard components, the scroll bar appears if you just hover over it. Here, it doesn't appear. You need to know to scroll. There are a couple things in reporting like that. So just thought to point that out. So once I've done the group dates by the year, we're in the report editor. Keep in mind, please never make a business decision based on the report editor. And I'll just show you why here. It's just showing me 2 years worth of data, it looks like. But if I go ahead and run the report, there is more data in the actual database. So it's showing me 3 years of data. This is the actual 397 records here. And it looks like maybe we got started as a business in 2019. We had a small amount of revenue, and then that amount of revenue increased, and that amount of revenue increased. This technique here is, instead of just showing the sum of the amounts, I've added a second grouping. And so that second grouping is on the type field, which is a standard field on opportunity. And we're seeing the opportunity amount with the striations for the types. And when you add a chart to a report, so if I come up here and add a chart to this report, there are a couple of different controls that we have in here. We could, look at one of the other 7. So there are 8 different types of charts. There are only a few that will handle multiple groupings. So a stacked bar or a stacked column, those are good choices. You could also use a scatter plot. However, in this case, I'll use a stacked column. And what I might also do here, I could come in and I can play with the colors. So this isn't well known when you're working with report charts. You can come over to the boxes over here on the right, and you can adjust the default palette, gray palette, color safe palette if you wanted to do that. We can also move the legends. A lot of times I like to leave the legend over here on the right. If it's a funnel, I'll leave it over on the right. There are a couple of other cases. In this case, I think actually it makes probably more sense below. That allows a little more left to right room for our chart. And let's say we had 6 years here, it would probably make more sense. But then you have the colors quickly visible across the bottom. So this is one way to show year-over-year progression. And we could look at this in so many interesting ways. We could look at our sum of open amounts by region. We could look at it by, if there are other types of opportunity categories. We could look at it if we have one sales team versus another sales team, who's selling the most. So this is, sort of a straightforward progression year over year. When we talk about these things, I do want to mention that the same techniques apply for quarter over quarter and for month over month. With month over month, there are a couple of other interesting things we can do. But for year over year, just keep in mind that these same things could be applied to quarter over quarter and month over month.
Sorry, Mitch had a question on what the analyze button does to the left of the chart.
Oh, yes. This is related to Einstein. It's sort of, you see the little Einstein face here. It's sort of like an emoji. Let's see if we can zoom in there. It's like a little Einstein face. These orgs have Tableau CRM, which was known as Einstein Analytics, which was known as Wave before that. And there's a feature that you can take advantage of if you have Tableau CRM licenses, where there's some extra stuff you can do. It's only here because this org that I'm working in, this Salesforce instance, has those licenses. So it's, if you zoom in, it looks like Einstein. But anyway, great question. All right, so this is grouping by dates. I do want to mention that another way to look at the exact same data, so this screenshot on the left is what we were just looking at, that progression by the actual amounts by type. Well, another really interesting thing you could do with the exact same data is to stack it to 100%. And then basically you're shifting, rather than the true sums, you're doing the ratios. So this I copied out of help. You can use a bar chart stacked to 100% when you have multiple groupings and are interested in the proportions between the values in each grouping, as well as each grouping's total. So I think this is a really nice thing that you could, basically save as that report that we just created, and then create another version with the proportions. And all you need to do that is just check this box, stack to 100%. And I think I have that open. So this is the exact same report with the stack to 100%. And you're basically, in the last report, one of the challenges is you just have this little itty bitty baby sliver over here, because our business has grown so quickly over 3 years. We've gone from, maybe $6 or $7 million in business to hundreds of millions. And so this isn't very meaningful, just these little itty bitty slivers over here. But suddenly, if we look at the same data by stacking to 100%, and again, it's just that checkbox on the chart, suddenly, each of the years amounts to 100%, and we're seeing the proportions of each of these things. So it's sort of an interesting thing that in our first year, our new business was the biggest part of our business, where 2 years later, we're getting all this upgrade business and add-on business. And that's good. That's probably a trend that we want new business, but we also want to sell to our existing customers. So keep in mind that that's available. Again, that's just a checkbox. If you go in and look at this, check the stack to 100%. Okay, so of course, Ty asked the almighty question. Now, notice that I said that we can use the same techniques for quarter over quarter and month over month. So QOQ and month over month. So Ty asked the question, this is the question of the week, and it's literally about weeks. Do you know if it's possible to apply the year-over-year techniques to a WOW forecast view? So to explain, we want to see each week and how our forecast changes. So one way to do that, Ty, is to use a reporting snapshot. And you might have the snapshot run every week, and you essentially date stamp every record in the snapshot. And like at OpFocus, we do that every Monday night. It's like 11 o'clock that it runs. And if this week there are 72 open opportunities, we capture those 72 opportunities. A week later, if there are 90 open opportunities, we capture the 90 open opportunities. We capture the stage, the amount, the owner, forecast category, stuff like that. So that's a nice way to do what you're asking about, Ty. So doing this same thing with month over month, quarter over quarter, if I come back in and look at this particular data and come back to grouping this close date, I do have calendar month and I have calendar quarter. These I said are pretty easy to work with. When you start doing calendar week, so the dates look very different. I don't have a great data set for week over week analysis, but let's actually just look at what we've got. So I might try to bookend this and just do, a year or 53 weeks so that I get at least, year over year for one of the weeks. But you can look at the same data week over week without a snapshot. So Mitch asked the question, is snapshot reporting something we've ever covered in detail? I'm going to guess a year ago, we did a little bit of trending. We should probably just do a whole session on snapshot reporting, just because of how useful it is, how powerful it is. To out of the box, you need to be an admin to build out the infrastructure to support reporting snapshot, but it's not a new feature. The one in OpFocus on our open pipeline has been running for more than a decade. So it's not a new feature at all, but it just sits a little buried. And if we were to go, and I'll just talk about it for another 30 seconds, and maybe we'll do a whole session on snapshot reporting. But if I go under setup, so if I put on my sysadmin hat, go under setup, feature settings, analytics, reports and dashboards, there is a category for reporting snapshot. To build a snapshot, you need to do three things. You need to create a source report. So at OpFocus, it's open opportunities, grouped by stage with a handful of columns, such as who owns it, the close date, the forecast category, stage. So you create a source report, and you create a custom object with those same columns, plus one additional column, which is for the date that the record has been snapshotted. And then the third thing you have an admin do, the admin has to create the custom object, but an admin also would come in here and essentially map the source report columns to a target object and schedule it. So that's in a nutshell so once that's all built and it starts running and weeks go by, then you can report on the snapshot, that target object. But we'll cover that on another, I think it'd be a good session. All right. So I do want to encourage you to take advantage of additional summaries. These things sit just waiting for you to take advantage of them. And at this time of year, they're super useful. And I would encourage you, you don't need, no fancy chart. You don't even have to put them on a dashboard or anything. You could just actually expose some more columns. So if we're looking at our year-over-year key one sales indicators, well, what we were talking about was sum of amount before. Well, what if we added the average amount? What if we showed our largest donation? What if we showed our smallest deal that we sold? Largest amount, smallest amount. We can also directly on the report, we can show up to 3 uniques. And I want you to keep these in mind because this is interesting. So such as how many unique industries did we sell to? So that may be a required field at the account level, or basically any pick list field that is sort of predictable and it'll be on there. How many unique regions did we sell into? Well, 3 years ago, we sold to 2 because we were just getting started in the business. And then maybe the next year we broke ground in 2 more regions. And then finally this year we've sold into 6 regions. Well, if that's a pick list on the account level or on the opportunity level, I can show the unique count. So let's go take a look at this. If you're building these reports, let's take advantage of some more stuff that's right at our fingertips. So here's that same report. And what's nice is Salesforce on the report at the top will summarize each of these things. So they're right available. This is across all the years. And this would mean, essentially, what's our largest deal size ever? And what's our smallest deal size ever? But then you get into the structure of the report and you see the individual years. And this is essentially the year over year going vertically here. But if I come back over into the report. So again, a lot of this magic requires that you group by something. In this case, we grouped by close date. And then after that, again, we saw earlier, go to the close date pull down, go to group dates by and choose calendar year. And from there, you're going to want to sum by something typically. And the obvious thing is probably to sum by the amount. You may have other currency fields or other number fields that you want to sum by. In this case, if I click on this, just what I'm saying here is keep in mind that these other choices are very valuable. Did our average deal size grow this year? Did it shrink this year? What was our biggest deal this year? What was our smallest deal? So these are available to you on any of these summary columns. And to show you about the unique counts, so if I were to, I can't do it in the summarized view. So I've collapsed this report. I've hidden the details. If I toggle on the detail rows, and then I go over to the lead source or the industry, I now have the option to hide the unique account. So if I hide that and then I come back here, I can click on it and I can show the unique account. So you can have up to 3 columns directly on the report that show the uniques. So let's figure out another pick list. How about, I look through the list here. Next step age, it's got to be a good pick list on here. Something at the account level. So we've got account type, rating, SIC code, ticker symbol. Yeah, not really any great. How about how many unique countries do we have? So not a pick list, but I can show the unique count because I'm just interested. How many countries did we sell into? So now if I go run that again, so those are always available to you. And I promise you, your leadership will be interested in things like average donation size. What was the biggest donation? What was the minimum donation? And they will be interested in stuff like this, especially how it trends over time. Now, to see the trending over time, I'm probably going to want to collapse this again. And to do that, I've got the toggle switches at the bottom, and I can toggle off the detail rows, and now I can see it again pretty well. Keep in mind that you can always resize these columns if you want to see, if you can't see, Salesforce, I've got a 34-inch screen here. I've got plenty of real estate, so I don't need these things to be truncated. I can resize them. All right. So those are some key metrics. I mentioned earlier on report charts, we do have the ability to add additional measures, and you can actually have up to 4 measures. This is another really nice way. In fact, building on what we just talked about on the last screen, all of those things could be measures on a chart. If you only have a second measure on a chart, you can add an additional axis and you can show that second measure as a line. So that's what I've done here. So when I added a chart, I scrolled down, clicked plus measure. It has to be the same data type. So if the sum of the amount is a currency, then the thing that I add as an additional measure, in this case, average amount, also has to be a currency. But once I choose that and choose the average amount, you can see in the screenshot on the right, I can choose to plot it as a line chart, and I could plot it on a second axis. And so it's very clearly some other data element. Now, if I wanted to add a third and fourth measure, I can't do it when I have that line chart. But if I didn't do a line chart, and instead, if I just added a measure without the line chart, I could add a third and fourth as well. So let's actually go take a look at that. Now, when you do this, you're going to want the data to be somewhat similar, like the sizes. So if I show side by side 339 million and right next to it show an average deal size of $1 million, that's going to look like a little sliver of hair next to it. And let's just see what that looks like. So if I come in here, it's showing me a horizontal bar. And when I'm talking about money, I tend to switch it to columns, unless I have a gazillion columns. And we don't want to scroll left to right, but 3 will fit left to right on this chart. And if I come down in here, you can see that the y-axis is the sum of the amount, and I can add another measure. And if I add average amount as a measure here, it's just a little teeny sliver. I don't think that's of value to anybody. So it's a small number. What I would probably also do in this case is move the legend, and I'd probably move the legend to the bottom, because otherwise it's actually hidden right up here behind, it just feels far away, and it's easier to see these when they're side by side below, to see them right side by side below. So, I mean, this is such a sliver of information that you can't even tell the color really. But so this is I'm in the report run environment and doing this. I don't even have to run the report again. It's already showing it to me. But let's actually let's add another one. So let's add a third measure. What's our biggest deal ever? And why don't we add a fourth measure? What's our smallest deal ever? So, because the annual amount is so massive, it's kind of throwing off the rest of this. But because I can show the show values, it sort of recoups it a little bit. But like this 14K smallest amount is not even a sliver on this report. I might actually not include the sum of the amount. I might actually rework this completely. And to do that, I might just literally come back in here, make this on the average amount, and then add additional measures for those things that are similar. And so I might even have two separate charts, two separate reports. If I put them on a dashboard, I'd probably separate them out, but you really don't want such egregiously different, there's a great word for this, but like the scales, you don't want the scales to be so very off. So here, if I show this now with the largest amount and I show the smallest amount, and I've got my values on there. So if we look at that, it's still a little sliver. The 14K is pretty, oh, and the 3.4K is really, really small. But again, you've got all this rich information that you can take advantage of. And you might similarly have, you might similarly do something with cases, and you've got the average case, how, what's the longest that a case has been open, what's the average that a case has been open. We might look at priority 1 cases differently than the rest of the cases. Hopefully we're able to respond to priority 1 cases and solve them quickly, that sort of thing. All right, so those are some different kinds of indicators to add additional value to your year-over-year reporting. We can also use formulas to show the dollar change. We can show the percentage change. Earlier in the year, we did 3 sessions on reporting with formulas. When we talk about summary formulas, we can use a function called prevGroupVal. And I tell you, this took me a long time to sort of feel comfortable to use. It's so straightforward. I wholeheartedly encourage you, when Ty was asking the question of week over week, with that much data, it'd be really interesting to see the week over week dollar change and the week over week percentage change. And you could do that by just grouping your dates, whether it's a close date, and then adding a summary formula with the prevGroupVal. And in this case, we're just saying the amount of the current year sum, so this 339 million, if you subtract the year before, so the prevGroupVal, so 339 minus 90 equals 248. That's literally all this is doing. It's just taking the current groupings amount and subtracting the prior grouping, and it's going to give us that change. And so for the top level grouping, it'll always be blank because there's nothing above 8 million for us to look at. If there was a 2018 year, we would have something to look at, but otherwise we don't. So it's just the first one will show blank, and then it'll show the additional ones. And you might even throw that next to your total amount. What was the delta from the prior year? And that's what I've got on this screenshot. So it's another sort of interesting thing to show those changes. Now, the math on doing the percentage change is really not that much harder. So it's the same exact formula in parentheses as what we just looked at, and then you're dividing it by the prevGroupVal. So this math here is we're basically saying 248 is what when divided by 90. So it's 272% of 90. So that actually sounds right. If it was of 100, it would be 248%. So it's bigger than that. 278 sounds right to me. And the same with this 82 million. What is that to 8 million? It's 1,000% increase. And again, it's a summary formula on the report. And then within that summary formula, using the prevGroupVal function, and this is the function here. The other reason why I like this a lot, very specifically for the percentage change, is this allows you to show the percentage directly on the chart. So let me show you what I mean. So if we were to look at this here, in order to see the percentage on a chart, I actually have to hover over normally. So if I hover over, you can see that the sum of the amount is 20.76 of the total amount. I'm not actually seeing the percentage on the chart, but if I want to, I can see the percentage on the chart. What I'll do here is just come and remove this chart. And what I'll do is, what am I looking at? Look like my filter changed somehow there. Okay, it's still looking at all time. Okay, that's good. So what I could do now is just add a chart. And if I wanted to show the percentage, because I've added it as a column, it's available to me. And maybe I just show the percentage change and show the value. And there's my percentage, the 76. So if I go ahead and run this, All right, it did some rounding here. It's got 1K for percentage. That's not, I'm not as big a fan of 1K. And I'm not as big a fan of this not showing the percentage symbol. I think that there's a way I could get around it if I used a row level formula and change the data type, but this isn't as exciting as I thought it would be to see the number 273. It's not really clear that that's a percentage. So that's a little disappointing. All right. So Kyle, any other questions come in?
Don't believe so.
Okay.
I think you've covered all of them as they've come in.
Great. All right, so some tools that are not helpful for year over year, I just thought to throw these in there because these could take some time away from trying to solve. There's a feature called historical trends, and you can see the screenshot up in the top right under setup, feature settings, analytics, reports and dashboards. There's a feature called historical trending. It is not applicable for year over year reporting because it will only log the current month's changes to whatever the object is, in this case, opportunities, and the prior 3 months of changes. It's not available for year over year. So I just thought to point that out. Historical trending is not available for year over year. Another one that's sort of maybe a little confusing is this thing called opportunity trends. This is an ancient feature. It was in Salesforce reporting in 2005 when I first started playing with Salesforce reporting. This is an automatic snapshot capability. You don't have to do anything to turn it on. The first day of every month, Salesforce snapshots all of your opportunity data. Whatever's in that on the first day of the month, we don't know what time of day it runs, but it's on the first day of the month. And that's a monthly snapshot. So I guess you could technically use it like saying, I want to see as of 1/1/2019, 1/1/2020, 1/1/2021, 1/1/2022. And you could use that to focus on the open pipeline as of those dates. So I guess I was thinking it wasn't as helpful, but now I could see you could isolate the first day of each year, and that might be one way to use it. So maybe I should put in the word not as helpful, but still that could be used. I'd probably just create a reporting snapshot because I feel like I've got a little more control over it. If you do not, let's do a session on reporting snapshots. But in the meantime, if you're not sure what they are and how to use them, you could technically use this and isolate the first day. And the use case there would be, I want to see what was our open pipeline on the first day of each year, and essentially compare that to see, is our pipeline growing year over year or is it shrinking? All right, looks like Lynette wants to see a reporting snapshot demo. All right, so we're going to do it. We're going to do it. So some other year over year ideas just to throw out there. I would have loved to have built out more stuff for today's session. I was thinking about this in the last week or so, and joined reports, there's more there. There's more we can do. I want you to keep in the back of your mind that with joined reports, we did a session on joined reports earlier this year that's recorded. All of these recordings are available on the Dashboard Dojo site. But joined reports allow you to structure up to 5 report results on one report. And I could see a use case where you use that structure to do a block for each year. And just that may allow you to do more interesting things. With joined reports, we have the ability to have more formulas. So on a normal regular report, we can have up to 5 formulas across the whole report. With a joined report, I think it's 10 formulas per block. So if any of you needed to do deeper analysis in a year over year, you could technically use joined reports to do that. We talked about reporting snapshots, guys. We're going to do it. I feel like we've already agreed on it. Why don't we do it the second session of the year? And why don't we do it hands-on too? That would probably be a good one to do hands-on. So we'll set up a second session in January, and hopefully you guys can come back and join us. Now, what we didn't talk about today was dashboards. I do want to point out sort of an interesting technique, and I had shown this on the show and tell, the last Dashboard Dojo we did, this screenshot. So this is not year over year reporting specifically, but more for the concept of it, that you might have year over year sales analysis and have a chart with the years as a dashboard component on the left side of the dashboard. And then you might pair that with a lightning table on the right side of the dashboard with specific details. And you can see here in this screenshot, this example, the person who created the dashboard just left a whole column blank, and you get the blue bar. But the idea being that the item on the right, the lightning table on the right, is showing, maybe extreme use cases or outliers or whatever you want to show to add more meaning. Maybe it's, we're looking at our deals year over year, and we want to show the biggest deals from the current year over to the right. So any data you want to call out, you could put, essentially pair a lightning table to the right of some year over year chart on the left on a dashboard. Another thing that would be really useful is just taking advantage of filters on dashboards. So with filters on dashboards, and I think I might have an example here somewhere. So let's go look at the dashboard tab, dashboards with filters. This is not a very special dashboard, but it looks like I've got case data. I've got open opportunity data. So this is not the best example. You know what I might do? I might just sort of butcher this a little bit. So let's, anytime you want to tinker with a dashboard and maybe see if you can make it better. So Ty, I'm picking on you again. He's new to the job. He's trying to make his mark. He wants to impress the bosses. And, Ty, something you could do is if you're working on a dashboard, rather than mess up the existing dashboard, what you could do is come up here, choose Save As, create a clone. So this is, Ty's awesome dashboard improvement with filters, something like that. We'll go ahead and click Create, and then, butcher the clone. So this is Ty's version of it now. Maybe Ty keeps it in a private folder while he's working on it. But for this example, I know I'm going to want to get rid of this and this, and I'm just going to want to do filtering on opportunity and perhaps underlying account data. So this is the world's dumbest looking dashboard, but bear with me here. What we could do is we could add a filter on here and do a filter on the close date. And you could add values that are relative. So I could do something like this year. And that's my first value. And then I could do another relative date value and do last year. I could also spell out the years specifically using calendar dates. So if that was more helpful, this is a little bit more dynamic. I think we can do 2 years ago. I had something bark at me recently, but we'll see if this works. 2 years ago. See if that works. Yes, this is an unsupported one. I thought there was a way to do 2 years ago. This year, last year. Okay, let's start with that. And if I were to save this, this is clearly the dumbest dashboard ever, just with 2 elements. But let's say that I had a whole bunch of other opportunity related elements here. That filter that you saw me add there, I can run it for last year. And it's just the filter will allow you to just rerun it for the prior year, or, these are open opportunities. So that actually made sense that there was nothing open last year. So I'd probably, for end of year analysis, I'd probably be looking at closed opportunities instead of open. And then I could see data from the prior years when stuff closed. All right, Mitch is giving me an idea. Last 2 years. All right. So last 2 years would be inclusive of last year. So if you guys haven't found this yet, if we come into help, you think I'd memorize this by now, but there is something called relative date values in help. It's now called relative date filter reference. Okay, so that's better. I'm going to put this in the chat. Scroll all the way down. So this is all those words that all right, so that took, it's still going. Look at that. Here we go. I think it's found it now. So let's put that in the chat. So relative date values. So these are super, super useful. Last N weeks, last month, N years ago. Oh, so I literally have to put 2 years ago. Oh, that's what I did wrong. So let's go fix that. If I come back in here and I go and edit my filter, and if I do relative, so it's the number 2 years ago. And that worked. And again, this is open opportunities, not the best example. I would probably just be looking at stuff that's either won or lost. All right, so we talked about a whole bunch of stuff. I did promise to show win ratio, so we'll show that in 1 second. On January 12th, we'll do a session on embedded analytics, and the session right after that, we'll do it on reporting snapshots. So hopefully that's helpful to you guys. The registration for January 12th is up on the dashboarddojo.com. We have some courses coming up, our 5-day admin class, February 14th to the 18th, which I teach. And then also I teach the March 1st to 2nd reporting workshop, which is coming up. So let's do that last example of win ratio, and you're going to love this. So if we come in here and, you know, I'm going to just create a new report. We're just going to do it from scratch. So we create a new report. We create the report on opportunities. And the key here is getting the filter right. So if I come into my filters and what I want, in this case, I'll do all time, and this would allow us to do year over year. And my other filter change I want to make is on the opportunity status, and I want it on closed. I do not want open opportunities in my win ratio calculation. It's the won sum divided by the won or lost sum. So all the deals that are won or lost, that's on the bottom of the divisor, and we divide that by, or sorry, on the top of the equation is the number of won deals. So in order to add a summary formula, we have to group by something. In this case, why don't we group it by sales rep? So we'll do it by owner. And to add that win ratio, now we just add a summary formula. And this formula is super simple. Okay, so we're going to call this win rate. I'll make it a percent. And literally, this is just the won sum divided by the closed sum. That's it. That's all you need. And now if I run this, I'll probably just collapse the report by hiding the detail rows, and then I'll run that, and you can see the win rate. So let's figure out who has the best win rate. Evelyn seems to be our champ, although this guy David, he's pretty good too. He's up at 100%, but he's only got a few deals, so it's probably all fake data anyway. Anyway, that's what we've got for today. Were there any other questions that came in?
Yeah, I think there was one. I don't know if we have time for it, but Tracy asked if you could show how to create dashboard specific details in table, or how to create a lightning table.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So you can take, you know, essentially any source report. It doesn't even matter. This is the, you all must know lightning tables. So I'm going to go back to the tie dashboard. I'm going to edit it. You could pick any source report. It doesn't matter. You want to pick, you know, you're basically selecting the report type, the underlying report type, and you're selecting the filters on that report. So I mean, it does matter a little bit, but let's go pick a report like year over year. How about the key sales indicators? So when I select that, when you add a dashboard component, there are 11 types of components. The one on the bottom right is a lightning table. And a lightning table is like magic. It can show up to 10 columns. It can show up to 200 rows. It can show raw details, so individual records, or you could show summary. So in this case, if I add the close date grouping, and if I come in here and I could add some of these other columns that we created, such as the, you know, the changes that we showed and stuff like that. So there's some really nice things we can do with lightning tables. Again, you can have up to 10 columns. You can do a top 10 list. You can add subtotals. You can add conditional highlighting, some really good stuff here. All right. So guys, it's been fun. Thank you for spending the time together. We'll be back. Hope you guys have an amazing holiday break. We'll be back January 12th to do embedded analytics, talking about how to embed report charts onto lightning pages, home pages, app pages, record pages, and also dashboards into home pages and app pages. So hope you can join us. It's really been a pleasure. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kyle.
Of course.